any of us, indeed all of us, can slow or reverse the effects of aging. Today, my guest is Dr. David Sinclair, professor of genetics at Harvard Medical School. Dr. Sinclair holds a unique and revolutionary view of the aging process, which is that aging is not the normal and natural consequence that we all will suffer, but rather that aging is a disease that can be slowed or halted. What is the difference between longevity, anti-aging, and aging as a disease?
Longevity is the more academic way we describe what we research. Anti-aging is kind of the same thing, but it's got a bad rap because it's been used by a whole bunch of people that don't know what they're talking about. So let's talk about aging as a disease. I looked up what's the definition of aging, and it says, well, it's a deterioration in health and sickness, and you can die from it. Typically you do. Something that sounds pretty much like a disease. Disease, here at Harvard Medical School, it was considered, if there's something that's wrong with you, and it's a rare thing, has to be less than 50% of the population, that's definitely a disease. And then people work their whole lives to try and cure that condition. If more than half the population gets this condition, aging, it's put in a different bucket, which is, first of all, that's outrageous because it's just a totally arbitrary cutoff. But think about this, that we're ignoring the major cause of all these diseases. Through most of the last 200 years, we've been sticking band-aids on diseases that have already occurred because of aging, and then it's too late. If we didn't get old and our bodies stayed youthful, we would not get those diseases. And actually what we're showing in my lab is if you turn the clock back in tissues, those diseases go away. So aging is the problem. So there are a couple of things. One is we want to slow aging down so we don't get those diseases. And when they do occur, don't just stick a band-aid on, reverse the age of the body, and then the diseases will go away. But fortunately, during the 2000s, we settled on 8 or 9 major causes of aging. We called them hallmarks because causes was a little bit too strong. But these 8 or 9 causes, at least for the first time, allowed us to come around and talk together. Free radicals don't do much. There are actually genes called longevity genes. We know that growth hormone is pro-aging. Anyone who's taken growth hormone, pay attention. You'll feel better for a short amount of time. You'll build up muscle, you feel great. But it's like burning your candle at both ends. Ultimately, if you want to live longer, you want less of that. And the animals that are being generated and mutants that have low growth hormone, sometimes these are dwarfs, they live the longest by far. But that doesn't mean that you're a slave to your early epigenome, nor to your genome. The good news is that the epigenome can change. Those loops and structures can be modified by how you live your life. You can have a bigger impact on your life than anything your genes give you.
Understanding the mechanism will allow people to make better choices.
Let's start with what I think was a big mistake, was the idea that people should never be hungry. We live in a world now where there's at least 3 meals a day, and then we've got companies selling bars and snacks in between. Animals, whether it's a dog or a mouse or a monkey, the ones that live the longest by far, 30% longer, and stay healthy are the ones that don't eat all the time. Maintaining muscle mass is very important for a number of reasons. You want to maintain your hormone levels. The body has remarkable powers of healing and recovering from illness and injury, and the body can really get rejuvenated in ways that in the future we'll wonder why didn't we work on this earlier. And what we once thought was a one-way street and you just can't repair, you can't get over these diseases, you can reset the system. The future of humanity is more like us walking around like Deadpool. We'll probably be cleaner and we won't smell as badly, but Deadpool, if you don't know, can get injured and just recover. It's very hard to injure this guy, and we're going to be the same.
So in recent years, there's been a growing interest in the use of cold for various things like improving stress tolerance, improving metabolism, recovery from exercise. Cold exposure does several things. Making ourselves cold can allow us to build up mental resilience.
We are now learning how to tap into that system. And in part, what we're doing is reversing the age of those cells and telling them how to read the genes correctly again, reversing the age of that epigenome. We're now also in a world where we're overwhelmed with information and most of it is wrong. And anyone can pretend to be an expert. The public they're desperate for facts that they can trust because they don't know what to believe anymore.
But it seems to me that there's an openness from the general public about health practices, that there are actually things that people can do to control their stress level, to control their sleep, to control their cholesterol, and to even control their lifespan, which I think is remarkable.
And one way that we know for a fact to slow down the ticking of that biological clock is exercise. Exercise isn't just beneficial for your fitness and for your vitality. It actually can stop diseases in their tracks. Exercise can slow down cancer. In fact, it can prevent up to 23% of all cancers from occurring just by doing moderate exercise every week. 50 minutes is sufficient, or 3 times a week with 10 minutes. Just get off your That's what we're saying. That's all it takes. It's not that hard. Walk around the block a few times.
Simply moving around a lot, even if those are subtle movements, greatly increases the amount of energy that you burn. Just the use of something like low-level movement, and it's almost like a tremor, but also these like short, small, fidgety movements. And while this probably won't compensate for chronic overeating, the caloric burn from this is considerable and very likely can offset a meal that had excessive calories or a kind of steady state of eating too much. There even have been studies that have explored other things that correlate with fidgeters. Fidgeters stand up very quickly at the end of a lecture, or they start to gather their things very quickly, whereas non-fidgeters don't. I think we all know people who can eat a ton and never seem to gain any body fat, or people who seem to eat very little and seem to gain body fat very easily. And I was always intrigued by that. And it turns out there are a number of different factors that relate to that. You might say, well, how could these little micro movements lead to so much caloric burn? And that's where it really gets interesting. But these cells in our body, they are there as fuel for the furnace of our body, which is our metabolism. The nervous system, neurons, has the opportunity to turn up the intensity of that furnace. It has the opportunity to increase the amount of heat that we produce, and therefore the amount of energy that we burn. Fidgeting movements, staccato movements, standing up, walking around, pacing, all the sort of nervous activities that we're so critical of in other people and sometimes in ourselves are actually mobilizing and oxidizing a lot of fat and a lot of energy. I do hope that people are exercising regularly because it's so important for other aspects of brain and body health. But nonetheless, we are all time limited, and we are not all so ready to embrace exercise, which brings us full circle back to the issue of diet and nutrition. When you look at different diets, you look at low-fat diets, high-fat diets, keto diets, intermittent fasting. Provided people stick to their particular diet, it doesn't really matter which diet you follow. Adherence, however, is always an issue. If you can't stick with something, then it's not very worthwhile.
hypnotized. What's up is down, what's left is right. Chasing stars and holding you. I can't see the end, but we'll see it through. Times don't fly too high. Be sure to keep the ground in sight. Fly forever if you keep it tight. Love the world but keep the sky on your mind.